Chris, what is our third main topic today?
Our third topic comes from Kyle Ginder. Well, it appears WBD may have found its very own Kevin Feige, according to The Hollywood Reporter. And that name is Dan Lin, an executive turned producer that worked on hits like Aladdin, the Lego Movie, and It. He would also not only be in charge of film, but also television, and he would report directly to David Zaslav, bypassing 3 other division heads, giving him complete control of DC. John, what do you think of Dan Lin leading DC?
All right, thanks a lot for sending this in. Now, it's important to note, this is not a done deal. This very well may not come to pass. But according to every reliable trade, that this is the guy they are now speaking to. Dan Lin. Now, I've been saying forever, Rob, whenever people ask, who should be the person to take over DC Films? I always say the same answer. Somebody whose name we've never heard of. It should be somebody that nobody knows, that none of us know, that people in the industry know, that we don't. That's who should be taking this thing over. So Dan Lin comes out, and it looks like he's in the running here for this. Now, this comes to us from the folks over at The Hollywood Reporter who write the following. First of all, why does he look 12? Never mind. Let's go on here. Lin's name appeared late in the game, but he has a champion in Warner's advisor, Alan Horn, the former Disney chair who ran Warner as president and COO. It was during that latter tenure that Lin worked for Horn, starting as a junior executive and rising to senior vice president of production. He struck out on his own as a producer in 2008, but not before shepherding movies such as The Departed. He also oversaw the infamous and aborted Justice League feature, which was to have been directed by George Miller, which I always wanted to see. The 2000-2008 Writers Guild of America strike and tax credit complications were factors in its derailing. Lin is a respected producer known for his smarts and, in a town full of hype and egos, his willingness to find experts in the fields that are not his forte. He has worked on franchises, the Robert Downey Jr. starring Sherlock Holmes features, the 4 Lego movies, as well as wildly successful 2-part adaptations of Stephen King's It. And that, of course, comes to us from The Hollywood Reporter. Now, what most average film fans are going to look at are his producer credits. They're going to look at those because those are the things we know and identify with. To me, that's the irrelevant part. Great, The Departed, fabulous, great, that's wonderful. That's not the important part. He was the head of production under Alan Horn, who Alan Horn still loves. Now, I will say this. At the end of the day, there is no person on this planet who is more qualified to give an opinion about who should be DC's Kevin Feige. There is no person on the planet more qualified to recommend somebody than Kevin Feige's old boss. There is nobody else who has a voice that is more relevant in that discussion than Alan Horn. And if Alan Horn is one, because I don't know Dan Lin. I've never met him. I don't know a lot about him. I was obviously not in the studio halls when he was an executive there or when he was the head of production or anything like that. I wasn't there. But all I know is that if Alan Horn says this should be the guy, then any other opinion I might have is irrelevant after that. Kevin Feige's boss says this is the guy to run this. I'm good with that. Now, I do want to point out that the Hollywood Reporter article is listing all these big successes. If you actually go through all of Dan Lin's movies that he has produced, they're not all great.
Easter Sunday,
as a matter of fact, which to me is the worst film of the year. But
it was Amblin.
Well, yeah, it's true. But you also have to keep in mind that before anybody knew the name Kevin Feige, if you just looked at the production list of the movies he was a producer on, you would also probably go, well, not all of them are winners, because that's not the important part. And so, look, is Dan Lin the name that I would have pulled out of the hat? Probably not, because I don't know a lot about him. And maybe he's not going to end up being the guy. But if Kevin Feige's boss says that this is the guy to head the division here, I would be comfortable with it if they made that announcement. One of the really interesting things about this, and we knew this in advance already, we've talked a lot about how David Zaslav is going to give the kind of weight and respect to DC that Warner Brothers has never given to DC, which is whoever runs DC. You know who DC is going to report to? Nobody. Nobody. DC is going to be its own complete division with no layer of management between them and David Zaslav himself. They've got the Warner Brothers Picture Group new CEOs. The head of DC is not going to be reporting to them. That's what kind of importance Zaslav is giving to the new DC studio. And this guy is going to be the head of not just the movies, whoever they hire in this position, he or she is going to be the head of the movies and the head of all the television production. And they will dictate to the other branches what content they're going to have to deal with. They're going to be able to dictate to HBO Max, I'm making this show and you're putting it on HBO Max. That's the kind of power they're giving here. The kind of power, influence, and support that DC has never had. And if again, I don't know anything about Dan Lin. All I have to go on is if Alan Horn says this is the guy, that's good enough for me. Guys, we want to take a second and thank the sponsor of this video, MasterClass. All of us here at the John Campea Show absolutely love MasterClass. With MasterClass, you can learn from the world's best minds, anytime, anywhere, and at your own pace. You can learn television writing from Shonda Rhimes, improve your comedy skills from Steve Martin, or you can learn filmmaking from James Cameron himself. With over 100 different classes from a range of world-class instructors, that thing you've always wanted to learn is closer than you think. I have personally watched Bob Iger's lessons on business strategy and leadership at least 6 or 7 times. Every time I watch it, I learn something new that I get to apply to my own business as well. And the best thing about it is you don't have to sit down and watch an entire thing all at once. You can watch the individual segments or just as much as you want in any sitting at a time. So guys, when it comes to MasterClass, I highly recommend that you check it out. Get unlimited access to every MasterClass. And as a John Campea Show listener, you get 15% off an annual membership. Go to masterclass.com/Campea. That's masterclass.com/Campea for 15% off MasterClass. Anyway, Rob, you hear about this. You and I both know truly finding the next Kevin Feige is a nigh impossible task. You got to find somebody who's going to do it their own way. But we hear this news. The fact that they're going to be reporting directly to Zaslav, they will have no studio bosses to report to, and the idea that it could be this Dan Lin guy. What do you think?
Well, first of all, Dan Lin is a very respected figure in the business. He's also been very successful. Now, I reached out in anticipation of this segment to a friend of this channel who
has worked with Dan.
Who has worked with Dan Lin, knows him very well, also incredibly successful in this person's own right. And I said, but does he know Crisis on Infinite Earths? That's what I said. And here's the answer I got. Well, I cannot say whether Dan has even read Crisis on Infinite Earths or if he knows the DC history like Kevin knew Marvel. But I can say with confidence that Dan is a better pick than any of the other names bandied about recently, aside from maybe Jeff Robinoff. I also know that Dan is a genuinely decent person, where Toby Emmerich fails in this category. Walter was doomed to fail because his hands were tied, as we've talked about.
We've talked about that many
by
times.
having to enforce the will of Toby, who installed him in that position. I know and like Walter very much, and I remember when
By the way, when you say Walter, we're talking about Walter Hamada, who'd be the outgoing DC.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with him too. On DC Fandom, he was awesome.
Yeah.
I know and like Walter very much, and I remember when I was in his office and saw boxes of comic books. Walter told me that Toby wanted him to run DC, even though he wasn't a comic book guy. So he had to do a deep dive, and he read everything. That wasn't the ideal way to bring in a person to run DC, but that goes in line with how Toby made his business decisions. Put someone loyal over someone who was right for the job. So I think that Dan Lin is probably a great choice. What I like about him is he was an executive at Warner Brothers.
Yes.
And Warner Brothers is a studio that, I worked at Warner Brothers over 30 years ago, and Courtney Valenti, Jack Valenti's daughter, started there. She's still there. She's still at Warner Brothers. I mean, you go to Warner Brothers for life. And I think that there's
unless your name's Christopher Nolan.
Well, yeah. Well, but he was screwed over.
That's right. I
and
know.
That's the thing.
I know.
I mean, Kevin Tsujihara, you come from amusement parks. The people that make that studio, there's a reason Clint Eastwood is still there.
Yeah.
Malpazzo was still there. And I think that understanding that corporate culture, because even though the execs change, there's a lot of underlings there that have stayed there for a very long period of time.
Right.
And I think Dan's a really smart guy. If you look at his credits, pretty, I mean, Easter Sunday notwithstanding, he's got a lot of great stuff going on. And I think that he's probably a great choice for Warner Brothers now. But like you said, and like our friend said, you can't tie his hands. And it seems like they're giving him free reign. And then the proof's in the pudding. You let somebody do the work they have to do. And if they succeed and make good choices and make great movies, most importantly, they'll rise to the top. And I think Dan Lin has the potential to do that.
Chris, I mean, obviously this is a huge decision for Warner Brothers to make. Who they put in this position is pretty much going to dictate a lot of the success or failure that DC has over the next 5 years and maybe longer, depending on how long their tenure is. This name comes out of nowhere. This Dan Lin comes out of nowhere. I didn't hear anybody else predicting this name. I certainly didn't. Comes out of nowhere. What do you think about the potential pick?
I mean, if Alan Horn's behind it, I think I can get on board with it. He's going to know more than me about it. But Dan Lin also had a company called Rideback. That's one of the companies that helped champion Aladdin.
Yep.
And
that's right. He's also behind Aladdin.
Yeah. And he is known for picking projects that appeal to a global audience. And I think that's a really, really big key here too, is what we've seen with Marvel, right? Having to answer to no one, doing their own thing, is Marvel has been able to appeal to a global audience as well. It's not just niche films. It's not only for comic book diehards. It is something that appeals to a wide array of audiences, tells multicultural stories, and can appeal to anyone, even, my folks who don't read comic books, much to my chagrin. So I think that Dan Lin can bring that kind of sensibility to this. And you know what? I friggin' love those Lego movies.
I do too.
I think they're great. And as one of our
particularly the Batman one to me is
Thaddeus in the chat was
good.
like, he did a great job handling those DC properties. Why not?
A little bit different kind of movies they're looking at.
But I'm okay with it. I think I obviously am biased, but I think somebody also who has dealt a lot with animation as well as live action is somebody fun to bring into the mix here, because he's spanned different mediums and I think is going to have a really, really keen eye for making a lot of congruency within the DCEU.
And I love the fact that, going back to the Alan Horn endorsement of this, is the fact that he worked for Horn. Horn knows him. And now you bring up his studio. That apparently, according to the reports, that's one of the holdups right now of the contract negotiations is, what is he supposed to do? What's Dan Lin supposed to do with this studio? Rideback, his name is, right?
He's got badass office space.
He really does. I was looking at images of it yesterday.
Yeah, man. He's got some badass office space.
Is it still in the Filipino district?
Yes. And so it's like, what do you do? What do you expect me to do with my production company that I have spent the last, X number of years building and developing and growing since 2008? Yeah. And apparently, I don't know what he is asking for, and I don't know what Warner Brothers is asking for, but apparently that is one of the holdups right now. So they'll have to figure that part out, because, man, you built a really big, successful thing there. Can you just walk away from that? I mean, I don't know.
They need to give him, on the Warner lot, there's Joel Silver's old offices and Richard Donner's offices, and they were facing each other. It's kind of like a donut. They just need to give him that and then renovate the whole thing and make it like 3 or 4 stories and make it DC headquarters.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah. And
but DC headquarters is down the street, but on the Warner lot, give him Joel Silver. I don't know who's there now, but Silver and Donner's offices, that place was the shit. That's the place to be. It's right by the water tower. It's right by the executive offices. Put it there.
Now, a lot of people always ask me, why are you so excited about David Zaslav in this position, right? And it's like, well, number one, because I think every decision he's been making so far is the right one, because it's the decisions I've been saying for ages they should start doing. But the other thing is this, and this is why I think if you are a DC fan, you need to be excited about this. Because, and I alluded to this earlier, Warner Brothers has never given the respect due to DC. They have never given the respect due. They've never even let it be its own studio, let alone give the people in it the freedom to do, and their leaders and their executives in charge of it, their true freedom to do the stuff. David Zaslav comes out swinging and says, DC is the most important thing we've got. It's the most important thing we got, and we have to treat it like it's the most important thing we've got. So we're not going to accept crap, and we're going to put in qualified leadership, and then we are going to give that leadership free reign. They will answer to no one except me, myself. That's it. Nobody else. No layers of management. No other studio executives who don't know anything or care about the comic book genre. None of that. Free reign. And I think that's why guys like Matt Reeves sign long-term deals. I think that's why we're going to see James Gunn signing long-term deals. And maybe that's why they can get a guy like Dan Lin. Anyway, guys, question is for you. What do you think about this potential choice? Maybe you like it, maybe you don't. Maybe you're like me. It's like, I always just wanted to be somebody I've never heard of, because that's the qualified people are the ones who do the behind the scenes stuff. But I don't know, maybe you feel differently. Whatever your guys' thoughts are, jump down to the comment section below and leave those thoughts there.